All right. Well, welcome everybody. Hey, back again here with Jeff and David Bush from growmyprofit.com. And we're super excited. We've got a great guest today. Chuck Hyde's going to be joining us and talk a little bit about his new book, Season in Leadership, and super excited to jump on in. And it plays right into everything that we talk about. I mean, Jeff and I, we developed these 6 steps, which is not brand new information. We just took logical steps to the process of scaling a business 2 to 10x in 3 to 5 years. And we said, hey, what are the things that people need to do to be able to develop a business that's scalable and profitable? And we've talked about these in previous sessions, and these are not, brand new topics. It's just the sequential aspect of improving each and every one of these along the way. And today we're really going to dive deep into the leadership topic. And we're going to talk about a couple of different areas of leadership and the different seasons that a business owner goes through. But this is going to be exciting because we're going to get a chance to really dive deep for those business owners out there that are maybe dealing with some seasons. Maybe they're dealing with some leadership inadequacies, some lacking of skills. And again, it's oftentimes it shows up in the drama and trauma that happens inside of our businesses. But I'm super excited to get a chance to introduce you all to my friend Chuck Hyde. Chuck and I have known each other for a long time, got a chance to disconnect for a little bit and just reconnected back when he launched his book. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, this is a topic that we would love to feature and share with more business owners. So I'm not going to go into the full bio because there's a long history here, but Chuck has led Vistage groups. I mean, he has led the Soderquist Center and is it Siloam Springs? Is that where we were located?
We were based there, yeah.
So Chief Operations Officer Don Soderquist from Walmart founded a center, and Chuck was the CEO and spent a lot of years working with organizational leaders at the C-suite level and higher that were basically in a position where they were dealing with all kinds of these leadership topics. And Chuck was a great facilitator. And then he moved into working with Vistage, was the Vistage Rookie of the Year 2018. Where's the trophy?
Nice.
Come on now.
Nice.
It's in a box somewhere, I think.
But in 2017, he founded his own firm and really started to go out there and work as a fractional operations officer and really working as a facilitator, coach, and can't wait to dive in. So Chuck, talk to us a little bit about your background and what got you so passionate, because you spent a lot of years talking about leadership. I mean, you and John Maxwell could probably have a good conversation because you guys are deep into it. What got you into that?
Well, thanks for asking, Dave, and Jeff. Thanks for the opportunity to visit today. I started my career in Fortune 100, working for Kimberly-Clark, and I was an engineer coming out of school, and pretty early in my career, I got thrust into some leadership roles. I'll spare you all those details, but it was just in a manufacturing environment, and one of the very first things was like, hey, we need to do something that's never been done, and the very first assignment, I was 25 years old, like, hey, let's go do this in a regulated environment. How can we make this work? And so that was my first assignment. Second assignment was, hey, we've got an area over here where trust is broken down, lots of different reasons why. We just need you to go in there and restore trust in this operations department. And so that's how it started, honestly. When I got that invitation, I was like, well, I'm not really ready to be done being an engineer yet. I mean, I just spent 4+ years working on that degree, and now I don't get to be an engineer. But so I was thrust into that pretty early in a Fortune 100 environment, and it led to a series of things where I was having to play up. So I know you guys are sports guys. I'm a sports guy. The obligatory sports analogy is always having to play up a level or two compared to maybe what I was ready for, and that afforded me unusual access to leaders and opportunities. 12 years at Kimberly-Clark, really fortunate period of time, working in the Huggies diaper business there. And I'll tell you that at the time, for sure, the disposable diaper business was, big time in consumer products. It meant a lot to Kimberly-Clark. It meant a lot to our chief competitor in Procter & Gamble and their brands than what was happening in private label. So there's the competition of business, that cut my teeth into a lot of that. I tell people that I got my MBA later, but my real MBA was that period of time, running projects for the North Atlantic diaper business inside of the Huggies brand. And, then I ended up having this opportunity to work again at Soderquist Leadership. And you mentioned our founding executive, Don Soderquist, was the retired as senior vice chairman and CEO of Walmart stores. And so, there's that's unique space when now it's Fortune 1 and you're part of the, the leadership team of what became, that long storied history. And so again, it afforded me extraordinarily unusual access to people and to leaders and environments. And, so at this point, some years later, I still feel like I'm a young guy who wants to know what I want to do when I grow up, right? But I find myself stewarding those experiences, and in some ways, the book is a version of that, and as is my practice. Talking to leaders, whether it's with an executive coaching, engagement or working with a senior executive team, it's about taking some of those things that I've learned. The things I try to pay attention to. I spend a lot of time in that, just paying attention to who's saying what, who's doing what, people like yourselves that are helping in growth, for example, to point people toward that. And so I've in the last year or so come up with this idea of being constructively provocative. And I want to provoke you, and not in a negative connotation sense, but truly like something's going to happen as a result of our conversation. And if we can do that in a way that's constructive and really focused on you, that's what I spend my time doing. So really all of that leadership experience that wasn't necessarily looking for, but I kind of looked around the room and thought, golly, here I am. I need to, ears open, mouth closed, learn. And, after a while, it just sort of accumulated to this place where I feel like I had something to share.
That's great. So you went from the diaper business where there's a lot of crap to the leadership business where there's a lot of crap, and you've had to
It can be a dirty
navigate.
business for sure. Yeah.
So, we talked a little bit about this offline as we're preparing, and you share with me, one of the areas that you really find your greatest sweet spot is working with companies that have 5 to 50 million in revenue. And I'm just curious, based upon all the years you've been doing this, what's the most common leadership issue that is nearly present almost all the time when you meet with a business owner, that the people that are watching this right now, they should start addressing that right now from a leadership perspective?
My early reaction to that, David, is truth telling. Are you surrounded by truth tellers, and are they willing to voice their perspective, voice what they notice? I mean, literally, I just came from a lunch appointment, and it was 4 guys, 4 leaders, and we're sitting around talking. And it's very much we're sharpening each other. But one of the guys mentioned that, his CFO didn't share with him a bit of information, right, that would have been material. And in that way, it wasn't great news. But we one of the things we talked about is what keeps someone, particularly in this case, a senior officer, from bringing forward, here's something you need to know, right? Whether it's bad news or, hey, here's a different angle on that same issue. Have you thought about this, right? Because multiple things can be true at a time. And, one of the metaphors that was introduced to me through some reading is, like this multicolored beach ball, right? And none of us have all the truth. And there's a phrase comes from I believe it's Liz Wiseman, who wrote Multipliers, one of my favorite leadership books. It's like, it's no longer about what you know, but it's how much access you have to other people's knowledge. And my apologies if I've misattributed that quote, but in the beach ball metaphor, you got the thing that's multicolored, all the stripes, right? If you're on the yellow stripe, a lot of times you think the ball is yellow. But if you're sitting on the orange stripe, you think the ball is orange. But if you take a step back, you realize, you ask what color is the ball? Well, it's yellow and it's orange and it's green and it's white and it's blue. And if you have access to that, I think when leaders don't have the ability, they might know it's a multicolored ball, but maybe their people don't. Or maybe they get myopic and have tunnel vision on something and they're not listening, or they haven't created that environment where people can speak into them that say, hey, there's another stripe here. So I would say it's that. I think it's the access to perspective and knowledge people have. And when you're small like that, sometimes it's just you're not surrounded by enough people who can give you that perspective. When you're bigger, it could be that there's some type of red tape, some type of, corporate structures or lack, breakdowns in communication, or just scale and intimidation that keeps people from feeling like they can raise that up. But I think it's when you're making now decisions on limited or incomplete information, that's the risk to the organization. It's a risk to the leader. And I think for me, when I was running our leadership center, I mean, I wanted truth tellers. I wanted to be that leader who people weren't afraid to say something if it was hard truth or an unfavorable result or whatever the case may be. Now we can deal with it. Now we can address with all the cards on the table. So I could go on that a long time, but that's my number one thing. I think that anything leaders can do to create space where people are bringing them information that informs that level of better decision making, better strategy, better idea of the current environment. Whether or not they have that becomes a real competitive advantage or disadvantage.
Yeah, and I could definitely see the value in that. Question, I would follow up question. How do you decide what's truth? I mean, there's a lot of people that could be constructively provocative and actually be very helpful in telling you the truth. And then there could be a lot of information out there that's based upon a person's story of the truth, or a story. And so how would you define, what is actually truth, and what, because now you got a bunch of people that are coming in with their own version of the truth. I heard somebody say kind of a similar story with the beach ball, is that everybody's got their own beach ball. And some people are looking at it from the top down, and other people are looking at it from the side. And so some people and it's kind of like their planet, it's like on their planet, they can see all the colors, but on your planet, you can only see one. And we're both right. It's like it's not that you're wrong because you're not able to see the other colors. It's just you have not gotten that perspective yet. So I'm just kind of curious of what kind of consulting or coaching that you would give to start moving towards a culture of truth, without necessarily opening up the door to, deconstructive. I like your wording there, but your deconstructive, or you said constructive provocativism or whatever.
Yeah.
But the opposite of that.
Well, yeah. So my reaction there, David, is I think it's if in your organization who your go-to people, and that are your trusted confidants, and making sure that is extraordinarily clear that you want and need that, and you're counting on that person to provide it. Right. So to me, it's almost like drafting who those people are and making sure that even if I'm not hearing from that person, if I know David is one of those people, then I'm going to go to David. If Jeff's one of those guys, I'm going to go to Jeff, right, and say, hey, what am I missing here? What are you hearing? So I think it's, in some ways, it's not just passively waiting for it to come, but it's actually going out and soliciting that feedback. The other thing I would think is extraordinarily important is get out of your organization, right? Who's your truth teller outside the company? Because if you're only measuring yourself, if you're only looking at data or whatever information from within the context of the company, that it would be a different form of myopia, right? And I think external benchmarking and external truth tellers is another thing that I think you cultivate and develop in a very intentional way. And so I think I think there's some intentionality that goes with that, not simply just being hey, you can tell me anything, right? And I'll be okay with it, because then you do, for whatever reason, it's either limited to your point, I only see one part of this, or it's biased in some way because there's an agenda behind it, and you don't want to necessarily open yourself up to that. I think it's having these external reference points that are a little bit more anchored in reality.
It almost sounded like a good pitch for consulting. Just
no, about it. Well,
we
it's
can
one of
do
the things
that
I would
outside
tell you mentioned the Vistage group, but the whole idea there is in those peer-to-peer environments, whether it's Vistage or any other format, right? The power of those groups is, hey, we're in on each other, and none of us have an agenda other than we're here to tell each other what we need, our best advice, our best perspective, whatever. And a trusted consultant, right? And we were talking about some of that offline in preparation for this call of why when do you need to hire a consultant? When do you need that outside perspective? And it's not that you can't do it yourself, but there's value in someone else having an external reference point. And so, yeah, I think whether it's like this group of guys I was having lunch with, we meet every 2 weeks. for the sake of sharpening each other. And it's Dutch treat lunch, for an hour. But there's an intentionality there that we're having. Or it could be through, hey, you're a subject matter expert in a given field. I need to hire you in a consulting form of way. It could be financial, it could be marketing, it could be leadership, it could be anything. But I need you for a season in this scope of work to bring capacity, expertise, but sometimes it's just objectivity into the environment.
That's good. Jeff, weigh in on this. What do you have to say?
Yeah, a couple, excuse me, a couple of things that I was just thinking about when you said you were an engineer. I think it was Peter Drucker 20 years ago said there's 10 engineers in a room and they promote one guy to be the manager. And 6 months later, he goes, I love being an engineer. All I'm dealing with is people problems. I hate this job. And I thought that was so funny, like, welcome to management, And it's like an engineer wants to be an engineer. They might not want to lead a group of 10 other engineers because they're very smart people.
You just lost it.
But
sorry, I lost your voice there for just a second.
Sorry, putting 10 of them in a room was just interesting. And another thing, when you just talked about trust, I had a lady that went to work at my ad agency who spent 20 years with Stephen Covey. And I was a big Stephen Covey guy growing up. And I found out he took a lot of Peter Drucker's work and just made it popular. And I loved Covey, but I never knew that his son was what kind of took over and had. So she brings this book to me and it's called The Speed of Trust. And I start reading it and I'm like, trust in a business? Like, what is this, a family? I was in shock reading that book, but it was talking about if you have a trusting organization, people will talk more and you'll get more insight. And that book really helped me as a leader to open my eyes to don't always come into the room with the solution and forcing change. I mean, I'm a pile driver by nature. I'm not a nice CEO. I won't be your friend, but I'll get results. But it wasn't always pretty. And the speed of trust, when you said that, it helped me. And just that engineering line, those two things just popped up from one 10 years ago, one 20 years ago. Probably haven't thought about it since, but that's interesting.
Well, both of those are great examples, Jeff. And I will tell you, like the Covey book, Speed of Trust, classic work. And Drucker's, I'm a big Drucker guy, but I mean, it's almost like at the time those guys become less and less in the foreground, and new people are writing new books or podcasts or whatever the ideas. But I think there are some timeless principles. And one of the things I talk about is the timeliness of the timelessness. A bit of a play on words there, but I think when you look at some of those things, and I think, to your point about 10 engineers and hey, let's promote one of them. I mean, it happened to me, but it's, one of the things I find myself talking to early career people is like, so you want to be a leader, right? Because there's this thing there's title and there's pay and there's status and there's perks and there's whatever that sometimes comes with positional leadership. And it's like, well, what are you thinking about when you're mowing the lawn, right? You're thinking about the business. What are you thinking about when you should be listening to your kid tell you about his day at school? Are you thinking about the business? What happens when, you got to let somebody go, when you got to think about restructuring, when you got to think like all of these other things. And so you want to be a leader. I mean, it comes with a lot of things that sometimes people that have not yet sat in that seat haven't really had to think about. And it is, sometimes, I mean, you got to want it. It's hard. It is hard. And when you are in a CEO role, and you're maybe the founder of the company, I mean, there's one of those often, right? There's that, and there's only one person thinking about it at the level you're thinking about it. It's been a wonderful experience of leadership for me, and the positional forms of leadership I've had, and the informal roles when people are just looking for somebody to step up among peers. Yes, there's a lot of things to that, and it comes with a burden that people count on you to lead. So be ready if you're gonna step into that role.
Great stuff. Well, let's jump into the book. And if you haven't had a chance to look it up, Seasons in Leadership is the name of the book. Super good read. I mean, when you're going through it, you're going to go, oh yeah, I identify with that. And maybe Chuck just puts words to it or puts a story to it that really speaks to the current scenario, or that, as I was reading, I was like, yeah, I've been through that season, or I'm in that season, and you broke it into 7 different seasons. So walk us through the 7 different seasons, just as a high level overview, and how you interpret them personally.
Yeah, and so thank you. The original idea of the book came from a client project, but it was one of these ideas of like, when you're in a season, what is the model or the logic sequence is really about, what is the season? And really I'm thinking about what characterizes the season, because in a season, we were joking earlier offline about fall, winter, spring, summer, or football season versus basketball season, or whatever the case might be. There are certain things that are now true that weren't true before. Right. And there's a certain amount of duration to this, which creates a certain need for focus. So like it's characterized by certain things, and that demands a certain focus from us. And then there's an appropriate role the leader should take. Am I going to be more directive? Am I going to be more listening? Am I going to be more participative? Whatever that role might be. And then at some point, I've got to create, a certain tone and message, right, to broadcast to the people who are looking at me as the leader. What are we doing in this season? Why is our focus going to be a certain thing? And so there's a tone and a focus to that, ultimately leading toward belief. What do we want our people to believe in that season? So when the 7 seasons that were created there, I try to be very upfront in the book. They aren't intended to be all inclusive. They're intended to be representative, right? So that you could look at it and go, oh yeah, I've been in that before. Right, here's my version of that season. It's different than the case study Chuck presents, but yeah, here's my version of that. So it's intended to resonate. And so the 7 were selected as things that people could quickly get. So it's whether it's internal disruption or external disruption, or what I call peak, everything is favorable, or when I call trough, everything seems to be unfavorable. Seasons of acquisition, seasons of crisis. How is crisis different than external disruption, for example? So when you walk through those seasons, the last one there, and I didn't get them in order, but it's this, I call it readiness. When the challenge seems to be, it either is bigger than what we're ready for, or it just seems like it is. And maybe the people don't know that, this is not that big of a deal, but it feels like a big deal because it's the first time they've dealt with it. So the idea I was trying to create some scenarios that people could go, oh yeah, I've been there. I know what that feels like. So now if I can overlay this model, this logic sequence into some things that make sense to me, how might I then extrapolate that into my season, right? Whatever, because again, there's an 8th, 9th, 10th, whatever example of seasons, and they're not in the book. But I say this in the book, and I tell people it's intended, like if you read chapter 1 and any one of the 7 seasons, you pretty much have it, right? It's a short book by design, but you can get that. And if I provoke some thought in you to go, okay, what is true about our season? What season are we in? What did we just come out of? What kind of season do we think we're headed toward? What's going to characterize that? Now I go through the questions in my mind. The idea is that people could take those exemplary stories that are in the book and really just begin to spark or be a catalytic kind of experience for either the leader or maybe a leadership team to do that self-evaluative process, and hopefully make some really good decisions about how they want to lead in the most appropriate, most effective way in that season to move the organization forward. So I would say that's a breakdown of the book.
Yeah, well, one of the seasons that we encounter on a regular basis is the season of growth, where there's the business owner wants to scale their business, they want to double it, triple it, 10x it, and they want to exit at a high multiple, or they want to exit the day-to-day org chart so they can enjoy some of the time, money, freedom that their business provides them. And that takes a certain amount of sacrifice, so if they're experiencing some level of freedom and now they have to get back into the org chart and really go to work on some things, they have to maybe transition some people, they have to do some of the things that they haven't done in a while. How have you worked through some of those growing pains with organizations? Because that can, kind of, you want to be a leader. Well, it's kind of like what Jeff asks all the time. You want to grow 2 to 10x? Because he's been through it, and you might have a lot of need for diapers. Like there's a lot of crap that comes in, and it's really challenging. And obviously the reward is worthy of the sacrifice for those people that have the commitment to pull through. But what would be your expertise on a growing season?
Yeah, I think the growing season, there's in the given pressures that you could have in that, I think there's two in there, and I kind of call them out in the book. One is, I would say keeping up, right? When the conditions are favorable and like we want to hit the gas and let's go, and the opportunities are there. And I mean, the client, the book is really a product of a client season they were in, and it was this season. And in that particular case, what the CEO understood at the time was that the amount of success they could have in the market to capture new growth. And it was truly like it was truly new business, right? They identified that like, here's the piece that's going to limit our ability to maximize the environment we're in for growth. And so we put in a plan to literally, address that rate. We'll call it the rate limiting step to growth. When you're going through that is the risk of burnout, right? That you're just like, everything looks like an opportunity. Everything is a yes. And you can get a little bit, where you outkick your coverage a little bit. And now all of a sudden things get wonky because your infrastructure isn't necessarily developed enough to keep up with servicing that new business, if you will. And so, part of it is when ideally you've had some, you've anticipated the growth and you've got that in place and you do it. But that to me is pretty rare, because it's always do I hire ahead, or do I hire in a trailing way? If it's people, for example, or do I acquire space ahead before I need it, or do I wait until I need space to get the space? I mean, it's all kinds of capacity issues, right? And so most of the time, it's rare in my experience, the people that are always ahead. So when you have to catch up to create the opportunity for growth, one of the risks is burnout of your people or your systems that now get exposed. We can't actually handle that load. And that's a real risk to the business, right? And so understanding how you lead through that. So as you then go ready the capacity to respond to the opportunity, there's a certain amount of strain that puts on the organization. And I think for a leader to recognize how fast can I push, because I know the opportunity might go away. It might go to a competitor, might just fizzle out altogether. So, and you don't want that. You want to get while the getting's good, right? And so I think that one stressor is that. The other one is almost like on the other end of the spectrum is complacency, right? Like you're just like everybody's winning. Like the conditions are so favorable, even if you stink, year on year, you're showing favorable results. And I think that what you guard against there to me is like, hey, yeah, this is great, but it's not going to last. Like, look at all the things that are in our favor right now. And so typically, when things turn, that's when the posers get exposed, right? Like, oh, wait, we really aren't as good as we thought we were. So I tell it so you could say in that situation, well, hey, we're up 10% year on year. Well, what if the market itself is up 20? And what if you could have gotten 30? Is 10 good? It feels good because 10% year on year feels good to us. Well, maybe, right? And so I think that guarding against complacency I think understanding which of those two risks in growth are you most vulnerable to? And it could be both, right? But I think understanding that, and I think the leader's ability to effectively make a judgment on that duality, or which one might precede the other, is going to be an important key. So that's what I guess an initial response to the growth question.
One of the things that, excuse me, we've been noticing is a lot of self-employed people that have $1 million in revenue, making $200,000 a year. They're super happy and comfortable. They got 5 employees. Their wife's the office manager. Their mother-in-law's doing the payroll. We're like, hey, you want to take this business from making 200 grand a year to 2 million or 20 million? Here's what it looks like. And they're like, I don't want to have a bunch of employees. Well, then you're not ready to grow. Stay
Right.
where you're at. It's amazing to me. Probably 8 out of the 10 entrepreneurs we talk to, they want to stay small. They don't want, they just, the thought of building a company with all those people literally scares them to death. And they, for some reason, think that they have to do everything. And they can't imagine, like, they're already at 100% capacity. So how am I going to manage 5 departments and 50 people? They don't even think, I'm going to find someone else to manage. It's amazing to me that these business, I mean, they can brag to all their friends. I'm a business owner. I'm self-employed. I don't have a boss, but man, they are not going to grow a big company. And it's funny to me that 80% of the business owners we talk to are very happy where they're at, just telling everyone they're self-employed. They think they have time and money. They really don't. The business owns them. They really, can't take time off. And it's interesting, and I think a lot of that goes to leadership, becoming a better leader, so that you're not the one doing everything, because you can't. It's impossible, so I
Yeah,
love
and that's where the leader, the founder syndrome kicks in, right? Either because they won't let go, or they don't have an appetite for it, right? And I think to your point, Jeff, people a lot of times will start a business and all they really did was create a job for themselves. And the risk in that is, how sustainable is it when things are tough, right? And scale and growth is part of a healthy, organization. And then, how much are you, and if you're not intending, if at the end of all of it, if you're just going to shutter the place, close the doors and walk away, that's one way. But then you think about, again, the people that you have this opportunity to, leave something to someone else, right? Or to create value in that company in a way that can live way past you. It's a completely different mindset. And I think I've come across the same kind of thing, and it is really kind of baffling. But yeah, they just, but I would ask then in that situation, just from the type of people to execute well, talent has options, and the people with an appetite to do more and achieve more and to grow themselves are looking for an organization that's growing. And if you say you hire somebody, it could even be a family member with aspirations, and like, I hate the phrase, it is what it is, but if the business is what it is and that's all it's ever going to be, at some point, talent is going to say, I want to go do this, right? And now the decay through complacency becomes a real risk to the business.
a lot of business owners trying to turn the business over to their children, and their children are like, hell no, I don't want nothing to do with this business. I watch how hard dad works. He's gotten nowhere. And it's sad if it doesn't build into a real business that can run itself. The kids want nothing to do with it. They're like, he or she worked way too hard. And yeah, they made above average income, but the stress level, I see my dad drinking, or, it's like, it's kind of sad that a lot of the kids don't want to take over the family business because it just looks like too much.
Well, and particularly in the situation like what you're describing, it didn't have to be that way.
Correct. Better leadership.
Yeah.
Read the book.
That's right. Yeah, when I saw Warren Buffett say that one of the biggest things that they look for when they're investing in a business is if the company doesn't get complacent. That was one of the major factors. And what evidence could they see that they were not complacent? Because these seasons of external disruption, you talked about in your book, you give some really cool information about the evolution of Amazon, and just that process of going from being a book dealer to buying Whole Foods and taking over distribution and streaming and all kinds of other things. That disruption is coming, or it's the internal disruption. It is the drama and the trauma that happens when the key employee dies, or the person that's inside the organization goes through a divorce or depression or other types of things. And then you obviously are going to be dealing with those issues. And so Warren Buffett also said that the person, or when the tide goes out, you can see who's been skinny dipping.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the great quote. No, and that's why like the chapter on internal disruption is all about understanding like, yeah, things are good. I may be on my sigmoid curve and things may be going up and to the right at whatever slope they are, right? But when do I need to jump off one curve to the next curve? Because at some point I'm going to peak and I'm going to crest and I'm going to experience decay or decline if I stay stagnant, right? And so one of the, years ago, and it was actually at a Soderquist event before I started working there, but I heard one of a panelist describe leadership as the ability to generate cheerful, willing followers. So in a case where we're going to internally disrupt things, we don't have to change. We're choosing to change. We're choosing to grow. We're choosing to acquire a new business. We're choosing to go to a second location. We're choosing to promote someone into a new whatever, right? And that creates change. Change often represents loss, right? Things aren't how they used to be. Hey, remember when it was all of us just sitting in your garage or sitting around the kitchen table, and man, we were in like, and people reminisce on the good old days, thinking they were maybe better than they actually were. But that represents loss. But at the same time, if you can get people to want to go to the next curve, to jump to that next curve, and it may experience a short-term dip, right? While we through transition, but now I'm on a new curve with a new growth trajectory and a new model that creates good opportunity for all of us. And so that goes again to the belief as a leader in that situation, like, hey, we want to grow. That is the goal here. And here's why it's important that we grow. We add a line of business, we add new capacity, whatever that thing is in a growth model. And it's going to be hard to do that, but the payoff is this, and our shared future is going to look this way. That's your focus and your tone and your message and your role all roll into one. So you get people to believe it's worth the effort to go to that next curve, because our shared future has something that's in there that's way better than we currently have.
Wonderful. Well, right in line with the things that we talk about in leadership, is basically knowing and being aware of what's happening in your marketplace, where it is that you're going, what season are you in, and what are the seasons that you're going into, priority management, and then building a culture of peak performance. And you've done so much in the area of talent. I would just love for you to just drop a few wisdom or pearls of wisdom on talent acquisition, talent management. What are some of your go-to top 2 or 3 strategies that you could share with these business owners that says, if you want to build a peak performance team or build a peak performance culture, to be able to guide you through all the seasons, here's a couple of tips that I would definitely be addressing.
Well, I think a couple things come to mind. I'll go back to, I mentioned Multipliers, the book from Liz Wiseman earlier. One of the concepts she talks about in there is tapping into native genius, identifying what people natively do well, and so well even, and it's like genius at it. And we all see it, and sometimes they don't. Like, and you're the world's best at it. And we just marvel at someone, and they're like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't know. Like, this is just the way I do things. And we're like, yeah, but you have no idea how special that is. When you can identify someone's native genius in that, and create that opportunity to maximize that for the organization and for their benefit, like that is I think from looking for talent even within your ranks already of who has capable of something way beyond what they're currently in from a role or a scope of role or the opportunity they're being given. So I think part of it is looking for that. And we start thinking about talent management type systems and talent reviews and managing people's careers, all that stuff I did in Fortune 100. I was a part of that. I was a product of that as well. I didn't know that at the time, but later on I was like, oh, this is how this works, right? And then even in our leadership center, while we were helping people understand how to do those things and facilitate those things for their company, we had to do the same things ourselves. Just because we were a leadership center, it wasn't like the sun was shining, the eagles were soaring, and it was just rainbows and butterflies every day. It was hard. Like, we were running a real organization with a real P&L and with real struggles and real competition and all those things. We had to be a good center as well. We had to be a good business as well. And so part of that was finding people's native genius, and we were able to do that. There's a time when we had, in part of our model, we had a fellowship program that people would come in and 2-year graduate program. We scholarship them for their MBAs, and they worked as project coordinators for us. So bear with the story for a minute, but we had this sort of unwritten rule, right, that we're never going to hire them. This was a launching point. This is their first professional role, but we launched them to some external opportunity, and they're going to go be great at something. And so, like I said, it was an unwritten rule that we would never hire someone. Well, my director of communications and marketing came into my office one day, and we were working on the launch opportunities for a young man who was about to graduate and move on to, and so we were actively helping him think about his launch. And he walked into my office one day and said, "Are we really going to let him walk out that door?" And it was an example of him being a truth teller. Like, this guy is amazing at this. He is natively genius at this thing that we need. And we're doing a great service to him by helping him prepare for his career. But holy smokes, are we really going to let that kind of talent and capacity walk out that door? And I thought about it for a minute. I was like, oh, you got a point. And so we broke our unwritten rule. We hired him. And he worked for us for another, I don't know, 4 or 5 years before it was time for him to go and do something. He's doing a great job now in a new company, in a new role. But it was looking for that talent inside your business that as soon as we unleashed him, he was a difference maker for us. I mean, at 23, 24, 25 years old. Now, the other thing I would say to that in terms of talent management and priorities and things like that is I'm a big believer in fit to role. So you've heard the phrase, let's get the right people on the bus.
Right.
Well, you're right. That then matured or graduated and evolved to, let's get the right person in the right seat on the bus. So right person, right seat. So I think fit to role is a big deal, right? But what that requires is not only an analysis of your people, but an analysis of your roles. And too often, leaders, organizations, particularly in that spot, why I enjoy the 5 to 50 million spot so much is right there in that growth section. And, like, life they've got scale, but it's not overly organized just yet. And if you don't understand the role that you're asking someone to step into, we're often promoting people into a situation where they're not going to be successful, right? We're taking them out of their sweet spot. So-and-so's a high performer. Let's move them over here. Well, what if you're taking them out of a situation that they're ideally suited for and putting them in a seat that is a terrible fit? But that is the role that's required. Like, the organization needs that done. You risk taking a high performer, turning her into a low performer, turning it into an unhappy or an underperformer, and potentially losing someone. Story that I'm familiar with an organization. One of the things, we use a tool in my practice called the predictive index, and they have it's a software solution around behavioral assessment. But one of the things I love about it is it actually helps you design the seat. And so in that, there's a subscribing organization, and they had an open spot, and I said, hey, let's take her and let's promote her. And she's like, yeah, I want to be promoted. I want to be promoted into that. And then when they began to look at it, they asked me what I thought. I said, well, I think she's great. But have you looked at fit to role yet? Mm-hmm. They started having that conversation, and credit to the individual. She opted out of being considered. She's like, I want to withdraw being considered for that promotion because I see now that's going to cause me to need to do some things that aren't my strength, that I really don't like doing. It's going to take me away from things that I'm one of the best around at. So yeah, I mean, I'm not against advancement, but not that seat. And how many people do we know would have enough maturity to bypass on that kind of opportunity? But she did, for her benefit and the organization. So I think fit to role, doing the discipline of understanding the roles and what is required. I spend a lot of time working on a client project right now on that very thing, where the roles are kind of jumbled and there's not a lot of clarity. And because it's a small business, it is more of an all hands on deck, everybody pitch in, which happens when you're small. Yeah. That kind of happens, but it doesn't mean we can't have clarity. And
you addressed you provided a nice graphic about situational leadership and breaking down the different styles of coaching or leadership with the individual employees. And that's an aha moment for many business leaders to realize. And I heard Phil Jackson one time say where he coaches Scottie Pippen different than he coached Dennis Rodman, and he coached Michael Jordan obviously different than he coached all the other players, because each one of them was uniquely different and they required a different level of communication, which is a higher level skill set. And most business owners didn't go to business management school and get their MBA in organizational leadership. They did it with their hard work and their grit and their decision making, and they're willing to take risks. And that's a big piece of the, putting people into a state of readiness. And anything that you would share on that, just to.
Well, there's a great quote we talked about Covey earlier. So Stephen Covey has a quote that talks about treat them all the same by treating them differently. And the idea of that is, and for most of us, if we have children and more than one child, like how often do we say, well, I've got to treat this child this way and treat this child the same way. And we love them the same, but they're just different. They're different kiddos, right? Well, with people, another or more recent metaphor that gets used a lot, and I love it, is when it comes to people, play chess, not checkers. And really, that's what Phil Jackson's talking about, is that he understood Michael Jordan, he understood Pippen, he understood Rodman, all those mixed bag of personalities and skill sets, right? And he did it with the Bulls, he did it with the Lakers, and the Knicks, and so on and so forth, right? Well, it's the genius of that is, as Covey said, I'm going to treat them all the same by treating them differently. Sometimes as leaders, we feel a burden I treat everyone equally, I treat everyone the same. And it's properly motivated to say, well, I'm not playing favorites. And so we don't want to mix that up, but it's when that turns into a one size fits all approach, we treat everybody as if they've got the same capacity, the same skill set, the same personality, the same demeanor, the same life story that brings them into our workplace. Like, it really dilutes the opportunity to get the best out of people. And so I think that's a really important point. To the point on the book, the situational leadership model, Ken Blanchard and Paul Hurst, created that. And it says, in a given situation, are we dealing with a motivation issue or a skill issue, or what is it? So based on the skill, or based on the person and based on the situation, I'm going to choose the most appropriate leadership style to maybe be more directive or more motivating, or maybe a combination of both. And it requires, I wouldn't call it more effort on the leader's part. It does require more discernment. And and I think the lack of that, of just, I'm going to treat everybody the same, really, I don't know, I want to, at the risk of being provocative, it's almost lazy. You're right. And I just think that as leaders, our people expect and deserve more from us. And when we are willing to discern the situation and the people involved and modify our approach in the most appropriate and most helpful way, it gives dignity to the person being led. It increases our ability to be successful in the outcome that we're hoping to achieve. And ultimately, I would argue, even a demonstration to others who may not be involved in the moment, but are watching, right? The teammates. And they say, oh, that's how David treated Jeff in that moment. And if I see that, I believe he's going to treat me that way too, right? And now I'm getting a little bit more excited about the environment that I'm in and the leader that I'm following.
So good. Well, as we wrap things up here, I know that the Stockdale paradox is not necessarily brand new information, because Jim Collins talked about it, and good to great. But you reference it, and in the growth season, there are some harsh truths about their current reality, right? I mean, it says the road to success goes through the sewer, right? And sometimes when you're going through the sewer, you just got to keep your mouth shut and just keep on taking the steps. So for those people that are not familiar with the Stockdale paradox, would you give some framework to that and maybe tie that back into the growth season and just, having people, it's great to have dreams and have a lot of optimism that your business is going to scale 2 to 10x, but it's also a brutal reality that it's going to take sacrifice. It's going to take effort. It's going to take, just being willing to embrace that and having realism combined with optimism. Anything else that you could share on that, Chuck?
Well, I love that. And for those that aren't aware of Stockdale Paradox, Google it and you'll see there's lots of resources out there. Again, Collins was the one that really kind of made this idea popular, but Admiral Stockdale, the origin was he was the ranking officer in a prisoner of war camp. And they talked about, Collins was asking what was the difference between those that survived and those that didn't. And the paradox, I'll paraphrase, but it is like being willing to confront the brutal facts, right? Confront the hard reality with an unwavering belief that you will succeed in the end. And it's that duality of, yeah, I've got to go through the sewer, but if I do, here's the payoff. Here's where we're going. And I think the ability to be willing to go through the hard with this unwavering belief, unwavering commitment that we're going to get there, even if you don't know the route, but it's just a certain amount of self-confidence. Sometimes it goes on that says, hey, I just believe if we keep doing the right thing, we're going to push through. We're going to knock through that wall and we are going to, we're going to get there. And I don't know every step in the way, but I know the next right step and probably the one after that. And I think as a leader, being willing to say, maybe you know every step you're going to do, great, if that's the case. But even as a leader, to be vulnerable enough and transparent enough to say, I don't know every step along the way, but I'm convinced if we do this and this, it's going to lead us to that next right step. And we're just going to have enough discipline to keep on. So I think that, I think it was Buffett had another quote, we were like the overnight success, right? Overnight success was created by 20 years of failure or whatever, 20 years of preparation, of hard work. And people look at it because all of a sudden someone achieves something, we think it just happened. And it's really the effort of a lot of discipline and a lot of willingness to do the hard work. You got your football jersey there, David. I'm a fan of the game as you are, and you played it at a high level. I will tell you, I had a junior high coach that one time, we were kind of on a losing streak, and as any junior high coach could, right? And he tells us, said, who wants to be good? And the guy's like, yeah, who wants to be good? Who wants to win? Who wants to win? And we all get the point, and we're all, yeah, right. And he said, who wants to do what it takes to win? And we all kind of caught us off guard, right? And it's very different between who wants to win and who wants to do what it takes to win. And whether it's in football or in business or in your family, whatever the case may be, if you're going to grow, you have got to be willing to do some hard stuff and get through it. My sister's a big Alabama fan. We all know Nick Saban just recently retired, and with great fanfare after an unbelievable run. But one of his go-tos was a two-word phrase: overcome hard. Right? You just got to overcome hard. Like you got to recognize. And so it's Stockdale paradox. It's hard, but if you're willing to put in the work, put in the discipline, have enough patience, and you overcome that, the payoff will be there. And I think that's the Stockdale of just this duality. You've got to believe that those things go hand in hand and be willing to go through it. If you're not willing to do what it takes to win, well, you can anticipate the result.
Yeah, I love Eric Thomas, the motivational speaker, that says, he's got a little better way of saying it. He says, everybody want to go beast mode on Sunday. Everybody want to be beast mode on Saturday. But you got to go beast mode on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, and really just picking the game. So before we cut this off, is Brock Purdy really just a game manager, or is he the best quarterback in the NFL? Let's get something straight here. What side of the fence are you on?
When you're, what is he, 21-5 and 26 career starts, at some point we have to give the guy some, acknowledge that he is performing at a really high level. And I appreciated the there, if you saw on social media this week, there was someone, a former quarterback from the southeast where I live, took a shot at him and how he was a game manager, not that good, and last pick in the draft, and da da da. And I appreciated Purdy's retort was like, well, and I think it was that Purdy was the 10th best player on his team. Well, maybe that's true. I don't know. But the retort was, well, there's 90 quarterbacks on NFL rosters, and he ain't one of them.
Oh, that's good. I know
So
you're talking about. I know
right
who you're
now,
talking about too. So
I'm a believer in Brock Purdy, and I don't know what's going to happen this weekend, but at some point you got to acknowledge the kid's done pretty doggone well.
yeah. But just to recap, the Stockdale paradox said from Admiral James Stockdale, you must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. And I think that's where the benefit of having consultants and having expertise and having people that have the faith and have the belief that are willing to be the truth tellers. If you don't have somebody that are, giving you that truth, they can give you the belief. You just have to buy into the belief. And I know that you end your model with belief. Talk a little bit about why you think that's so important, and then we'll wrap
Well,
it up.
I think it's simple that in every day that they show up, in any situation they're in, right, they're going to make decisions partially informed by whatever they believe to be true. They're going to exercise judgment partially informed by whatever they believe to be true. They're going to engage or not engage. The amount of discretionary effort they give is going to be tied up deeply in whatever they believe. We like to believe that, or we like to think that decision-making is largely a logical exercise, and study after study shows that it's not. Decision-making is emotional. And so I think the more we can get people to believe, and in a Stockdale paradox kind of moment, that things are hard, we got a brutal facts with an unwavering belief that in the end, it's going to turn out, like, that's a powerful idea. If we believe that in a readiness issue, like I talk about in the book, like, we can't do that, we've never done that, then despair could set in. But if you're like, hey, we'll figure it out and we'll adjust and we'll, we've got what it takes to do this, even though it's never been done, that's going to inform everything about that. So I just think belief ultimately has such a play on what any individual team member, how they receive that message from leadership, how they're making sense of the competitive environment, how they're making sense of the workflow, whatever that is you've given them. Belief plays a primary role in exactly how they're going to engage that. So I think it's in everyone's best interest that the leader click on that and really make sure that we get people on the same page there.
Wonderful. Well, I hope everybody goes out and picks up a copy of Seasons in Leadership by Chuck Hyde. And any final wrap-up comments about where they can find resources and contact you if they'd like to engage with you in a conversation to possibly bring you into their organization and help them with navigating the seasons?
Yeah, sure, David. Thank you. Yeah. So probably the easiest website is c3adv.com, as in C3 Advisors, c3adv.com. You can buy the book there. You can also get it on Amazon. But my contact information is there, and happy to. A lot of times you'll see on there, and what does it look like to engage? One of the first things we're going to do is tell me about you, right? And as I said, fit to role. I may not be the right fit to whatever it is you need, but I work hard at knowing people like you guys and others that are credible experts in their own field, and say, hey, who you really need to talk to is this person. And so I make a commitment on that. And so I think anytime, just even a sounding board type of thing of where do I even start? Let's discover where we are and where we want to go. That's out there. And so people can look at the website, find me on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find, I think, and love to connect.
Yeah, great content provider, and yeah, good all around dude. I mean, just somebody that you want to have in your corner to know and to bounce ideas off of and to bring into the organization if you're in that season. So Chuck, thanks so much for joining us. And yeah, I grabbed a lot of ideas, and we look forward to continuing this conversation as time permits.
Well, I appreciate it. Again, ton of respect for what you all do, how you do it, and love the opportunity that we get to collaborate on things. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Chuck.
You bet.
Thank you.